This is November 5th. Floyd, Emma, and I are here. And this is one of the most misunderstood points in all of our teaching, and one of the most necessary. Because it is repeated so often that we do not go to God for anything. We do not have to look to God for anything. We must not go to God for supply or health or companionship or home. Somehow or other, it seems to indicate to many of our students that this means you mustn't do anything. Of course, this would just be leaving the human universe as it is. In other words, it would be ignoring all the appearances instead of doing something about them. Now, this must be clearly understood, that every claim or appearance that is brought to our recognition, that means to our attention, must in some way be dissolved. Because all of these appearances testify either to human discords or human harmonies, material good or material evil, physical good or physical evil, material abundance or material lack. And just because we don't go to God for anything doesn't mean that we ignore all of these appearances and say that God is all. There is a specific activity that must take place in our consciousness in order to dissolve the errors of the world, whether these are errors appearing as individual experience or collective. When the Master says, I have overcome the world, does it not indicate that he did something? Or that he specifically did something about the world that he overcame? Or did he not indicate that there is a world to be overcome? Why do you think we're here? First of all, why do you think we engage in a metaphysical practice? But more especially, why do you think that this group is assembled? What do you think is in my mind? Or what do you think it is that has been nagging at me to bring this group into existence? If not the fact that there is this world which operates on the individual level to appear as sin and disease and lack and death, and which appears on the collective level as theological sin, government by men, erroneous government principally, but even if it were good government, it would have to eventually be translated. You can't even be content with good government forever, any more than you can be content with good health forever or an abundance of supply forever. Someday that has to be translated from the material sense of good into the spiritual. So actually, while part of our function is to destroy the erroneous material sense of existence, by far the most significant part is overcoming the good material sense, for it is this that traps us. It is very much like the founding of the United States government, and no one seems to argue with the fact that it was most wonderfully accomplished, and that the motives behind it were completely pure, and that a wonderful degree of intelligence and brotherly consideration went into the founding of this nation and its laws. But do you not see that that has not sufficed? For the simple reason that regardless of how good it all was, someone else can come along and destroy it. So it is with our health. So it is with the government by men. It would make no difference if the United Nations could really bring about peace on earth tomorrow. There'd be no permanence to it, because it would only be based on the amount of good that each nation would receive, and as soon as one or more did not receive what it considered to be its share, the war would start over again. Now, the point that I'm trying to make is this. A specific something must take place in your consciousness when the erroneous condition, or the material condition, presents itself to your awareness, when it is brought to your attention. This operates on the individual level in the form of somebody asking for specific help on a problem of health. Now, you can't ignore that call, nor can you answer it with a cliche, God is love, or God is all, I am with you. That's all right outwardly, but inwardly something has to be taking place. Otherwise, the picture that's presented to you is going to remain. It is what takes place in your consciousness at the moment of the call, at the moment of contact with the erroneous appearance, that determines what's going to happen to that appearance. Is that clear? You just don't turn away and say, God is love, or I am with you. Something you do, yes, outwardly, but inwardly something has to take place now, or that picture is going to continue. Now the question is, what takes place when that call comes to you? Well, it is not a formula. So it may be different in every case. As I brought out yesterday in the case of the boy with the fever, the first time what took place in me was just a click, but it wasn't enough. The next time it was presented, something else had to happen to me, and it did. There came the realization of I. There is no he. I am he. That was a deep enough of a realization to destroy the outer picture and say, I have overcome the world in that regard. But so it is with every specific claim that is brought to our attention. At the moment that it's brought to our attention, some activity of consciousness must take place within us, or the picture remains the same. And that is why it often is that if something doesn't take place within us, or if we're too busy to do something about it at that moment, that we may have to stay up all night that night to accomplish it, merely because we let it go past us first place. Now, I'm emphasizing that at this particular time because it is a matter of such importance to us in this particular work that we're doing. We are being faced, in one instance, with this advertising gadget. And I can assure you that that advertising gadget is going to go on and wreck this entire universe. if something doesn't specifically happen in the consciousness of those of us who know its danger. We'll find ourselves, every single one of us, joining a new church or an old church, or voting one particular way, or all wearing the same clothes, or all spending our vacations in the same place. If one of us, or some of us, do not receive a specific light on that specific subject, now how should we go about it? Well, as that presents itself to me, I know that it couldn't present itself to me other than through my mind. My soul faculties know nothing about such a thing, any more than God knows any error. Therefore, I know that it is being presented to me by an activity of mind, and to an activity of mind. And it is only through the avenue of the mind that I can ever get to know about it. And because the mind recognizes only mental and material things and thoughts, I know that it has no basis in spirit or God or soul or consciousness, no activity of God to support it or maintain it or sustain it, and thereby I see its nothingness. And then I can sit back and wait for the soul realization, or what we call the click, and I can be assured then that hypnotism or suggestion is not operating in my consciousness and probably not in human consciousness. Now, because of the depth or degree of this particular error, it may be necessary to work on it days, weeks, months, or years before it's completely nullified in consciousness. The only thing we can be sure of in our first realization is that this evil shall not come nigh my dwelling place. I have met it within me. But it still says that 1,000 shall fall at my left and 10,000 at my right. And our particular function in this group is to stop it from happening to the 1,000 at our left and the 10,000 at our right. I told you this is the first time in the history of the world that such a thing has been done. And that's why, unless we know every single phase of what we're doing, we can't hope for success. Blind faith won't give it to us. Hope or our goodwill toward the world won't give it to us. Something specific has to take place. Even God isn't bothering about it or worried about it, because God hasn't ever been worried what happens to mortals. They've been enslaved 1,000 times, and they will be again. They've been murdered. They've been slaughtered. They've been persecuted. God pays no attention to that, because God doesn't function in that realm. Then what are we doing? We're doing the one thing necessary. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. We'll stay in mortality until we specifically learn the truth and know what to do about it, and so will our fellow man. And the only way we can pray for our enemy, the only way that we can pray for error, is in an activity of truth in our consciousness which dispels it, so that we can say, I have overcome the world. But heretofore we have been content to overcome the world for me and say, my demonstration is made. Now we're at the point where we're considering the 1,000 at our left and 10,000 at our right, who do not and may never, or at least for generations, may not know what this is all about. Now it begins with your individual experience with the claims that present themselves to your consciousness. Because if you haven't mastered the ability to recognize that when a claim comes to you, that it's up to you to dissolve it, that you specifically have something to do about it within your own consciousness, that an activity must take place within your consciousness that dissolves it. How can you be ready for the next bigger step, which is dissolving the mass errors of this world? Here we have a worldwide religious conspiracy operating to hypnotize the world into a state of government in which there is a hierarchy up above which has all of the world's goods, and everybody else is a peon, a peasant, a slave, bringing even their coppers into the storehouse to buy more diamond images and gold. And you mean to believe that can ever be stopped or destroyed by human means? No. No, it operates under the guise of a church. Therefore, nobody can touch it. Nobody can do anything about it legally. And certainly nobody can revolt against it. How is it to be stopped? Only by a conscious activity of truth in the consciousness of those who know that there is a way to dissolve even that mass hypnotism. So it is with all this cry of communism or socialism or benefiting the underdog. That's mass hypnotism. There isn't anybody cares about the underdog in communism or socialism, or, as you've seen recently, not even in trade unions. They're only used to create a hierarchy of millionaires at the top and slave laborers bringing their tithes into the storehouse to keep the millionaires, all under the guise of doing something for the working man. There is only one reason that we have this group, and that is to learn this, that every phase of error that is brought to your attention must be handled within you, in some way resolved into its native nothingness, dissolved into its native nothingness, and that by a conscious act of truth in consciousness. A claim is brought to us of an enlarged heart, and accompanying it all these symptoms of weakness and lack of strength and so forth and so on. Is that dissolved merely by the statement, I am with you, or by the fact that we don't go to God for anything? No. That is dissolved by the fact that it has come to my awareness, and now an action of truth will take place in my consciousness, and it will dispel the picture. Will it change the heart? No. It never was a heart. It was a mind image brought to my mind for acceptance. Just as much as if it was a picture on a screen brought to me to be believed when my eyes see it. So this image is brought to my mind for me to accept as a mental image. And as long as I do, it remains the image of an enlarged heart. But immediately I realized nobody brought me a heart. What they brought me was an activity of mind, a universal belief about heart. For as a matter of fact, who is to say how large a heart should be? Must all hearts be alike? And is life subject to a heart, or is the heart subject to life? Does a tree determine life, or does life determine the tree? Does life function a tree, or does a tree function life? Does a body function life, or does life function a body? Then the heart can't govern life. Life governs the heart, but life is God. So whatever there is to heart has to be harmoniously governed. Then what about this image? Well, that's it. It's an image. It's an image in thought. It's a mind concept. It has no substance, no law, no cause, no reality, no effect. And it never was a heart. It never was more than a mental image, a creation of mind, a mind activity, second Genesis. And it's brought to me, and I dissolve it through my knowledge, through my inner conscious awareness that all true creation is the first chapter of Genesis. And that there's life long before there's a heart, just as there is life before there's a man on earth. Otherwise there'd never be a man on earth. There can't be a man first and life afterward. So there can't be a heart and then life. There has to be life and then a heart. And life can govern the heart, if there is such a thing as a heart in the spiritual kingdom. But what we're talking about as heart isn't even a heart. It's a mental concept of what a heart must be, or what a heart should look like, or what size it should be. And all of that is a mind creation. Now, when I have realized that, and then waited for my inner click, I will find that we have a normal heart. At least the doctors will say it is. What they will actually see is a mental picture which will result to them through the transformed consciousness. In other words, the consciousness of truth now appears outwardly as a physical heart, harmoniously functioning. Well, so it is in our work in this group. Anything that is presented to you for work, you must remember, is coming to you from the realm of mind. It isn't coming to you from God. It's coming to you from mind. And therefore, it is not coming as a thing. It's coming as an illusion. It's coming as a mental image without substance, law, cause, or effect, without reality, and without spiritual history. And so it is that we're going to work on these universal problems, not in a different way than on the individual problems, but starting out in the same way. Only instead of handling them as if they had to do with our patient Jones, Brown, and Smith, we're now handling them as a world illusion or universal belief, and so forth and so on. We have meditated 15 minutes to let this lesson solidify within us and to receive the click of release. Now we're going to meditate for a different purpose. Now it is to establish consciousness so that you who tune in will find that when you tune into this room, a consciousness is awaiting you, and into which you will be attuned, and from which you will receive enlightenment in one form or another. Our meditation was 10 minutes, but in the very first second, the words were clearly given to me. Before Abraham was, I am here. And there was the complete realization that it is so, that this place is filled with this divine consciousness. But it came specifically, before Abraham was, I am here. And so I know now that this work is going to bear fruit richly. This is the 6th of November, and today we have Daisy, Floyd, Emma, and myself. And I would like to start by going back to a matter that we took up some days ago, that of some of these claims that do not readily yield to metaphysical practice or spiritual influence, and in the recognition that we perhaps need further unfoldment on some of these specific forms of erroneous belief. I mentioned that of cataracts, did I not? And this morning we have another letter on the same subject, asking for help on that specific claim, showing by the fact that so many claims have come in this last week or two that there is a need for a specific realization which is not merely aimed to help these particular ones who have called upon us, but to eliminate from our own consciousness this entire subject. And so I'm going to ask today, but not only today, but for as many days as may be necessary, that each of us here, and those of you who are hearing the tapes, take up specific work on this claim. Now, one of the reasons for these meetings is this, that I find too great a misunderstanding in the field on this subject of treatment or healing work. And if our small inner group does not understand this thoroughly, we are not going to be able to convey it to those who are to be our practitioners and teachers. The point that has brought about the misunderstanding is that our writings are clear on the subject of the fact that we cannot go to God for anything, or we cannot go to God and channel God's activity to you or to me or to this claim or that claim, or that we do not go to God for healing or supply or family or companionship. Because of this, it has somehow come to be understood that we do nothing about anything. Since you don't have to go to God for it and can't go to God for it, why, we have nothing to do. But this is a misunderstanding. We cannot go to God for something specific. But that doesn't mean that we do not have to do something specific to bring the government of God into our experience. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Do you believe that I can do this thing? Go show yourselves to the priest. You must forgive 70 times 7. You must pray for your enemy. The infinite way does not release you from individual responsibility. It releases God from the responsibility of doing something for us, but it increases our responsibilities and our duties. Now, healing work is not conducted by doing nothing or thinking nothing. Healing work is not conducted by asking for help and hearing the practitioner say, I will be with you. This is all nonsense. When I say to you or write to you, I will be with you, that has nothing to do with the healing. That's merely an assurance to you that I've taken cognizance of your claim and I'm going to do something about it. It doesn't mean that I'm going to ignore it, nor does it mean that I'm going to appeal to God for my dear patient or student. Nothing like that. Now here is what actually happens. You present a claim to me, and instantly, simultaneously with that claim touching my thought, there begins something within me that results in, you might call it transmutation. what is the correct word? A transformation. You might also call it alchemy, changing dross into gold. But this doesn't happen without a process going on within me. Every time a claim is presented to me, I feel something taking place within me. There is a process going on in there. And that process is divided into two parts. In the first place, the moment the claim is presented to me, whether you voice it, or write it, or cable it, or telephone it, I do not see it as cold, grip, flu, or paralysis, or whatever you have said it is. But automatically, a truth comes to my thought out of my experience, which is the first step in transforming from the belief or claim to the demonstration of harmony. It may go something like this. It may be that you present a claim of sickness, physical sickness, and I immediately realize God as constituting all real being, and that any and every claim is but a mental image being presented to me. We have called it appearance, belief, claim. But it's only a mental image which is being presented to me, and this image has no life. It has no substance, no law, no continuity, and therefore is substanceless and void. In another case, you may present a physical claim, and immediately I may think, well, now wait a minute, there's no such thing as a patient, for the only being there is I, which is God. God is the only being. God is that which I am. There is only one I am, so there is no you. Or it may be that you're presenting a claim of lack or limitation, and then a smile will come to my face, and I'm saying, actually, you're not talking about supply. You're talking about a lack of money or a lack of property, because there can't be a lack of supply, for the life of you, the invisible soul of you, is the infinity of your supply. That you've got. And because you don't know it, temporarily you're without money. If you only knew that money isn't supply, that I am supply, that the I of your being is supply, that supply is an invisible substance, then you'd stop struggling for supply and you'd give money a chance to appear. Now, regardless of either or any of these, or all of these, that may take place in my thought, this is not the complete healing. Because now, having thought these thoughts, or having expressed them, or reviewed them within me, now I have to sit back and let God place the seal on this treatment. In other words, I have to sit back and be receptive, and then into my consciousness comes a spiritual impulse. It may be in the form of a deep breath, or it may come as a distinct message, the Word of God, which is quick and sharp and powerful. Or it may just come as a sensing of harmony or peace, but this is the part of the treatment or healing work which I call grace. The first part was the activity of truth in my consciousness, which I was responsible for. But the second part I had nothing to do with. That was, I call it grace for this reason. Any activity that comes into my experience, which I'm not personally responsible for, I call an act of grace. In other words, it is a transcendental something that happened to me or within me, but not by me. That I call grace. If a spiritual truth comes to me without my conscious thought, that is an act of grace. If money comes into us in the infinite way, outside of some channel for which I was responsible, like holding a class or selling a book, then I call that an act of grace. Or that which originally produced our tape recording work is an act of grace, because I never consciously sought it, thought of it, or even desired it, and as a matter of fact, it had to be pushed on me. So therefore I know that a transcendental something was responsible for it. Now when you present a problem to me, and I first iterate or reiterate whatever truth I know within me, that is the result of my study and practice. But then when I sit back and say, "Speak, Lord, thy servant heareth," and hold myself receptive, and the Word of God comes to me in any form, even if it's only as a deep breath, that I take to be an act of grace, or the Word of God, which is quick and sharp and powerful, and it does the work. Now just imagine that this has to take place in your consciousness, both halves of this process, with every claim that is brought to you. Now it doesn't mean that a matter of time is always present, because sometimes when a claim is presented to you, especially after you've had years of experience, this whole process takes place so quickly that no time was involved in the whole thing, unless you can call a couple of seconds time. But there are loads of other occasions, and I have been very honest in telling you about these in classes, when I have had to sit up all nights in order to arrive at that second part of the treatment. And sometimes, as you well know, I've had to continue treatment for you for weeks or months until the real depth of realization came that resulted in healing. Now let no one misunderstand this thing that we can't go to God for supply, or we can't go to God for healing, and interpret that to mean that we don't go to God or that we don't do something. For the very reason that we can't go to God and expect anything of God, we have to do that much more. And it isn't that we do it as if it were an act of healing of our own. It's only that we have to do it to attain the higher realm of consciousness where demonstration takes place, and let me explain that. Never believe for a moment that spiritual good comes out of anything that you know or think. All of that is in the realm of the three-dimensional mind, the thinking mind, which is not power or presence. It is only when you are above the thinking mind that you attain the fourth dimensional consciousness, which really does the work. And that is the reason for the second half of this process. The first half of it takes place in your conscious thinking mind. But then when you open yourself, "Father, speak, Lord, I will listen for thy voice," or anything like that, now you're opening yourself for the fourth dimensional consciousness, and it does the work. For too many years, students have believed that some knowing of their own or the knowledge of more books is the kingdom of heaven, but it isn't. But this step of the knowing mind, the thinking mind, and the reading of books cannot be avoided, because there you have the steps up which we climb to the fourth dimensional realm. So it is now. Here we are presented with a really universal claim that calls itself cataracts. I know nothing about this claim, and I have no interest in what causes it or why. My only interest in it at this present moment is that it seems to be a claim that every once in a while keeps knocking at my door through those writing me, and that up to this moment I cannot feel that this matter has been satisfactorily met. Therefore I say that there is something for us to do. Certainly, so far as knowing the truth is concerned, we already know what the truth is, and in our specific work we will know it. But then there's a step beyond that, and that is when we open ourselves to the transcendental presence and power and receive some kind of illumination that will knock this claim out of human consciousness. Now we will start to meditate, and at the beginning of our meditations, let us consciously unite here in this room, and the way to unite is to understand, first of all, that we are not a group of people uniting here. And perhaps the word unite itself is erroneously used, because actually the only way we can meet here is through the understanding that I am here, but that there is no other one here but I am. The moment we think of two or more uniting, we can only think of it in the sense that where two or more are gathered together, I am. In other words, that there are not two or more together, it's I am is one. And I am here, and I am there. In other words, we can't go anyplace. We can't send ourselves anyplace. And we can't be any other place than where I already am. And therefore, I am already here, and that I am includes all that constitutes individual being. Okay?
Sunday, when I tuned in, I got a definite message telling me, call no man on earth thy father. Now today, it came as call no form or visible form, thing or word, thought and truth.
Here is the essence of the actual work that took place here Sunday and today. That which is presented to us as mental image has no creative principle, regardless of what form it assumes or name it has. It's an effect, but not the effect of a creative principle, which we call God. Not the effect or form or body of anything that has substance, cause, or law. So that really is a confirmation of all that took place Sunday and today, showing that every picture presented to us must be seen as having no creative principle, or an empty image or form. That was the lesson this morning with Bessie. And now, we have that presented to us within our activity of our thought, and then comes a period of meditation in which the spiritual impulse takes place, which itself is the word that is quick and sharp and powerful. Now, in the end, of course, we're going to discover that our goal can only be accomplished in the degree that this transcendental presence, this grace which is released through us, dissolves material sense. But evidently, the way of arriving at that dissolution of material sense will be, for a time, through meeting of these specific claims as they arise. And it is for this reason, then, that we will continue for a while to see what unfolds in the way of this handling of the claim of cataract. And remember also that we are not to stop our work on this claim of what might be called prenatal influence, or the children that are born into this world bringing with them mental and physical handicaps, and for which materia medica has, of course, no cure. We recognize, of course, that all of this is the product of material sense. It isn't personal. Therefore, we cannot do as the psychologists do, go back and see what the parents have done, because we accept fully that no longer shall it be said in Israel that the parents have eaten sour grapes and therefore the children's teeth are set on edge. But we do know that material sense in some way is responsible for the entire material picture, and that its erroneous aspects must first be dissolved. And so we have at the present time 8 children who have been brought to our attention, and we have had very good results with 3, a little result with 2, and so far no noticeable result with 3. And so it is that we have much work to do on this nature of claim. You know, of course, that the newspapers are filled now with the stories of satellites and 200-foot monsters flying around the air, and more and more experiments on the part of all of the governments on these new discoveries, some of which are hoped to be beneficial and others destructive. And this, of course, is the very essence of the work that this group is doing. That is, the recognition of these claims of material force and power, and the way in which we will learn to handle these so as to alter the human picture. This morning in my work, it came to me clearly that all of these creations that are being made are the work of man, and that in some way we are meant to see that I shall not fear what mortal man can do, or again the recognition of these as creatures or creation, and therefore not law or cause. Think of this. November 7th, we have had the full hour and a half, but I have had the whole time in meditation, and nothing intruded into the meditation. No problems, no beliefs, no thoughts, just pure meditation. Floyd had a long and deep meditation. Emma? Same. That's all. November 8th, Floyd, Emma, and I, in the first half-hour meditation, resulted in a very, very deep meditation and a complete release, probably what would be called a release from this world. And then another meditation, about 20 minutes. And in this, and I'm speaking now for myself, the theme was, no weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper. And my mind went first to this advertising gadget, which I could see as a weapon aimed at the entire peace and prosperity of the world. Really aimed to bring about the destruction of individuality, since it would compel mass action, mass obedience, since it would be a control of the mass mind instead of a setting free in one's individuality. You see, here is a tremendous point to be remembered. All things like socialism, communism, Catholicism, mass advertising, political domination, all of these have only one object, and that is the herding of the masses, the control of the masses, and the destruction of individuality. Now, as opposed to this, Christianity, as it was taught by the Master, and the constitutional form of government, which was given to us by the Founding Fathers, and the Masonic fraternity, all such activities have as their goal the development of individuality and the achievement of individual integrity, individual unfoldment, the freedom of the individual, the respect for the individual, the honoring of an individual as an individual. Now, you may say then that Christianity, democracy, Masonry, these glorify individual achievement, individual accomplishment, individual unfoldment, individuality entirely. And of course, spiritually, individuality means the individual expression of God's being, because one of the meanings of individual is indivisible. And so it is that, spiritually interpreted, an individual is one full and complete expression of all that God is. And therefore, you must understand that everything that the Infinite Way stands for, which is the identical platform of original Christianity as given in the Gospels, which is the exact standpoint of our Constitution and Bill of Rights, which in turn is the foundation of the entire Masonic teaching, all of these are given to the world for the revelation and unfoldment of complete individuality. All of these other things that I have mentioned are aimed at the destruction of individuality and of individual being and individual integrity. Therefore, in this meditation, I saw all of these as weapons formed against thee, against thy individuality, against the individuality of the people of this world. And therefore, that which was given to me in the meditation is that none of these weapons, none of these, remember, and I've mentioned the principal ones, none of these shall succeed, since they are but the arm of flesh. They are the mental creations. You might call them the mental miasmas, the mental skullduggery, that which has no foundation in truth, that which has no principle to support it. And seen in that light, we must demonstrate that none of these weapons that are formed against our individual integrity, against the individual integrity of every individual on the earth, not one of these shall prosper. And then the next vision that I saw was that disease, regardless of its name or form or character or nature, that disease is another one of those weapons that is formed against thee, because it is formed against the continuity of thy very existence. It is aimed at not merely one's comfort, but it is aimed to bring about the destruction of individual life. And so it is that disease, regardless of its quality or nature, must be understood as one of these weapons that is formed against thee, against individual spiritual consciousness, against immortality of life. Not one of these shall prosper, for these also are mind creations, second chapter of Genesis. The creations of man, not of God, and the creations of man are without foundation, without creative principle. The arm of flesh or nothingness. This is November 9th. Floyd, Emma, and I. We've just had a meditation, and this is what came. Have you had an opportunity since yesterday of discovering that all of these problems that you are handling, whether you're for yourself, for your patients or students, have you noticed now that you can instantly bring to yourself the reminder that these are the weapons that are formed against thee? The human arguments, the materially destructive influences or mentally destructive influences, and that in many cases, even though you've been knowing that now since yesterday and applying it to some of your cases, that perhaps nothing has happened and that there's no seeming improvement or healing. I hope that this is true anyhow, because I want you to see clearly that the healing does not take place because you know that all of these claims, physical, mental, moral, financial, are but the weapons that are formed against thee, but that there is the further step of realization. Now this is the point that I make in all of our writings and all of our classwork, but it is the point that I notice in my correspondence that very few actually realize to be the important point. And so I have to begin with just the 7 of us and see if I can make it clear just to us, if I could only have this 7, to actually understand that if you can name it, that isn't it. If you can think it, that isn't it. If it exists as the letter of truth, that isn't it. That those are just steps to help you relieve yourself of fear and doubt, and thus enable you to get into the silence where the realization can take place. Now, once you perceive this point, you will more readily understand the next. And that is that the only degree of safety or security or harmony that is going to take place in your daily experience is in proportion to the actual clicks or realizations that you attain throughout the day and night. And I stress that there must be many of these, and on some occasions they must be deeper than on others. But that in any event, it is only in the degree of these clicks or realizations that your